welcome to the Old Man Orange Podcast. I'm Spencer Scott Holmes.
And I'm Ryan Dunigan, and today we are doing another retrospect on a movie neither of us has seen before.
That is true. This is almost kind of be like, it's that going back in time and watching those movies that you always wanted to watch and you just have not got around to it yet, so podcasting with it is the perfect way to do it. But really quickly, before we even get into that movie, I want to do just a little shout out. I was on the Comic Central podcast just recently of Chris Hendricks, who is a totally awesome dude. We got to have him on the show. He's awesome to talk about, likes everything good comics, optimistic, fun-loving guy, loves old movies. Perfect. But the Comic Central podcast, which Comic Central's like that other Comixology website. I know that's probably not how they want to be referred to as, but it's like the super indie only, like no big companies that get in the way of indie comics. But yeah, we had a great old time on there, so you can check that out on Podbean or iTunes or anywhere like that. And we're supposed to talk about Pizza Boys, but you know how that goes. We ended up talking about like other stuff for like an hour, and then, oh yeah, by the way, the reason why you're on here, it felt like one of those ones where you like go with the Nerdist and someone's supposed to talk about a show. At the very end, they're like, fuck, we're supposed to talk about the show I was in. Oh, god damn it, let's get it across quickly.
Well, I'll have to check that one out. What's it called again? That got all staticky for a second. What was that?
It's called Comic Central.
All right, awesome. And they're a pretty good show. Like, and you guys basically just bullshitted and just had a good time talking, and you covered Pizza Boys at the end of it.
Yeah, well, we talked about kind of just like creating things and animation and just video and everything around the board of what you can do, creating anything, I guess, slightly indie / freelance and so on. But yeah, really good podcast. There's a lot of cool stuff on there. Some of the other kind of indie comic guys I know have been on there too. So all types of cool information on that one.
Awesome. I'll have to check that out.
But other than that, though, what we're doing on this episode here, so we're going back in time to 1977 to a totally awesome hockey movie with good old Paul Newman heading the cast. And it's called Slapshot.
I'm placing a personal bounty on the head of Tim McCracken.
You can't put a bounty on a man's head.
I just did.
Go get him, killer!
It's wild. It's outrageous. It's outrageously funny. Paul Newman, Coach Reggie Dunlop in this supercharged world of hockey, invites you to meet the crazies who make it that way. The players, Murderers Row. The wives, the fans, the managers.
We're losing!
Teamwork, guys. More team.
They're burying us alive!
Who are these guys? They brought their
Toys with them!
And hustling them all, Paul Newman.
Oh, you are very clever.
Leave him. My wife left me. I was driving her crazy.
Get out! You can't make him win. You're a losing coach.
Okay, guys. Show us what you got.
Behind the comedy, the sex, the wild excitement, this is the absorbing story of one man fighting to hang on in a world gone absurd.
They don't want you to score goals. They want blood. They're booing you!
There's never been a film like Slapshot. There may never be another.
Yeah, this is one of those movies I've heard about a lot. Like, I'd always hear when people talk about one of the best hockey movies, I always hear Slapshot mentioned. And, you know, sports movies, they're kind of hit and miss with me. I usually like hockey movies. Hockey's one of those sports I think I would have got into it if I just... I think I liked playing foot hockey and like on the pavement when as a kid and all that, and I was actually good at it, but I just couldn't skate, so that's always kind of steered me away from actually playing hockey. So, but I always enjoyed hockey movies, so seeing this, I was like, all right, yeah, sure, let's check it out. I like Paul Newman, and oh man, I'm mad at myself I didn't see this movie sooner.
Well, it's just sort of those things, like I always just say in life, it's kind of like when somebody puts somebody else down for not seeing a certain movie. I always say it's like, well, we all chart a different path of so many movies, and even if, especially for me and you who have watched more movies than the average person by far, it's almost that kind of thing of like, if there's movies we missed, that's kind of okay, because that means we saw this many more other movies that probably a lot of other people never saw. But still, seeing Slapshot, it was just like, oh my gosh, this is like pure comedy gold. Like, and it's an awesome story. And what I've kind of actually realized, though I'm not really into sports unless it's like wrestling or something like that, when it comes to sports movies though, it's always kind of a different story, because it's like I always do kind of enjoy a sports movie, and it's once again, I think it's because you got the story and characters, which is missing in regular sports, but in the movies you get all that fun stuff there. But Slapshot is just almost like, if I had to say if there was a similar feeling kind of like movie, I would almost say it's like if you liked Happy Gilmore and you want something actually more extreme than Happy Gilmore, Slapshot was kind of exactly like what I felt like it was.
Well, it's also one of these movies where I watch it and I never thought I'd hear Paul Newman say half the shit he says in this. I've seen R-rated. I've seen movies from the 70s, Martin Scorsese movies and all that, where they swear a lot and they say fuck and shit and they even say cunt here and there. But not that this movie is like, this movie, how do I put it? It's not that this movie is like, oh my god, they said that? This movie seems like your average kind of standard for like foul language and all that for movies today. But back in 77 when it came out, this had to be groundbreaking. And especially just, I was so surprised some of the things they say in this movie just for the time. I can see people saying that now. There's one joke, which we'll get to later, but there's one joke where I'm like, no way you can get away with that now, but fuck, I'm glad it's here just because it's just a time capsule. I'm guessing we probably both know a joke I'm talking about.
Well, this is the part where I feel like it's the perfect, like, are you in or are you out? Like, you could just say it right at the very beginning of this show, because this is going to think it's like, if you can't handle this joke, you can't handle this movie. And there's a part at the very end where Paul Newman, well, it's not at the very end, but towards the end where Paul Newman goes to talk to the lady that owns the hockey team and go like, yo, are you going to keep us around or are you going to throw it out? Because the whole point of this movie is that they got this hockey team that's kind of based on a town where they have like a steel mill or something like that, and the steel mill gets shut down. So because of that, the hockey team's going to get canceled as well too. And when he goes to talk to this lady who owns the team, she just kind of says, no, I'm going to fucking let it fold anyways. Yeah, I could afford to do it, or I could afford to sell it, but it's not worth it for me tax-wise, so that's what it is. And then Paul Newman just goes, he looks and goes, you know what? Your son there looks kind of like a fag. How about you get married soon, or he's going to end up, sucking on a dick, or like have a cock in his mouth.
Your son looks like a fag to me. You better get married again, because he's going to wind up with somebody's cock in his mouth before he can say Jack Robinson.
How dare you? How dare you?
Which is one of those things I never thought I'd fucking hear him say. And I just, died of laughter on that. Not so much at, the homophobia aspect, but just at the end, just someone having the balls to say that to this rich, uppity fucking lady.
Well, that's what I just thought. It's like, I was laughing so... I was like, that was one of the funniest jokes I think I've ever... I think also it tops it off, it's just because it's Paul Newman. Because, I guess when I picture Paul Newman, I picture him like Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid and so on. And it's like... In these movies, he's still kind of like the hard-edge guy, but this one's the one where it's just like he gets to let loose and just swear all he wants and say things, and just like that line right there, he's like, your son's gonna end up with a cock in his mouth because you fucked up. Was just, it's the perfect line. See, that's the kind of things. This movie has jokes in it that I feel that people nowadays, I bet you this movie has a hard time playing on certain channels and so on, just because the material in it is like the total opposite of the PC movement. It would scare, a lot of people nowadays. A lot of weak-minded people could not handle this film. That's what I like about it, is it has very hardcore jokes in it. It shouldn't be in my opinion, I just go, to me it doesn't bother me. It's it's a joke. It's not like somebody's being serious or anything like that. And plus it's the 70s. That's how people talked and everything like that. That's just how it was back then. And also, this is the thing I found really interesting. The script is written by a woman. Yeah, her name was Nancy Dowd, and she was the person who wrote the script, and her brother was a minor league hockey player, and that's where a lot of these stories came from in Slapshot. They just came from that lifestyle of, being in this minor league when everything was super violent and so on.
Well, it shows. It shows how accurate. I got a feeling this movie's really accurate. I mean, this is still. I was doing a little bit of research, and this is still a favorite among hockey players, and on tour buses for hockey players, they still watch this a lot. And if they have a story that's untrue, they often refer like a news story by a sports writer that's untrue. They often refer it by that character's name who wrote the Florida story in the movie. Already drawn a blank on the guy's name. But yeah, I thought that was kind of interesting. That's that well known.
Yeah, no, well, and it kind of makes sense. I mean, you think about like generally sports movies, you know, there's one for especially sports outside of like baseball and football. There's not tons, you know, I mean, even hockey movies, like I can think of a handful. You know, you got Miracle, you got The Goon and Goon 2, you got, like, you know, Mighty Ducks and so on. So it's like there is a handful of hockey movies, but it's not as common, you know, as how many baseball movies there are or how many football movies there are. And probably if you're in the rest of the world, there's probably a lot of soccer movies. You just don't see that at all in America.
Yeah.
It's probably not even allowed to have a soccer movie appear in theaters at the moment.
Well, also, it's just I wonder how like controversial this movie was when it came out. Just for how much swearing and just the way they were talking. Like, it didn't seem like it was really trying to be overly explicit. It just seemed very real in that aspect. Like, and just some of the small things, like some of the small humor. Like, there's the one referee that doesn't seem that likable, and there's the three Hanson brothers that are always starting fights. And I like how before the national anthem part of that one match, they start a fight. And they say, "Hey guys, knock it off. We're getting ready for the national anthem." You see the three of them all stand there looking all bloodied up. The referee walks up to one of them and says, like, "Listen, I want a clean game. I don't want you guys messing it up." And he yells out, "I'm trying to listen to the fucking song!"
Well, it's like those Hanson brothers, and I love when they first show up because it's like you see them and they all just look like they came out of the Ramones. That's like the first thing I thought when I was like, oh my god, like just like you hired the Ramones to come in and fucking like skate it up. And Paul Newman, like, he goes to check on them and they're like in the room and he sees like one of their bags there and he opens it up and it's just a bunch of like toy cars and everything like that. And then he goes back to the guy that is technically the manager of the team and whatnot. He goes there, he's like, "What the fuck, Bob? You hired a bunch of retards! Like, what are we supposed to do with these guys?" And it's just
Well,
like,
I
at first
when-
it like leads up that you don't think anything much of these guys, like, oh, they're not going to be very good and anything like that. And then next thing you know, it's like, no, these guys are like the best guys for the team.
And there's that part when he goes to the train station to pick him up, they're just beating up on a Coke machine, like, "It stole my coin! It stole my quarter!" And he's like, "Oh, cool, gave it back." And they're all grabbing their shit and leaving. And then one of them here, I'm not sure if you picked up, one of them says like, "Hey, you think they play Speed Racer here?"
Yeah, I heard that line right there. I thought that was kind of funny. But what I like about those characters, though, is they're these guys that have like such like almost like anger issues and so on, but they're almost like the most nicest guys ever. Like, there's literally a part where somebody chucks their like keys into the ice rink and it smacks one of the brothers in the face and it knocks his glasses off and everything like that. So he decides to go jump over and into the audience and start finding the guy and who it is. And he just starts punching random people because he can't see. And his brother's like, no, not that guy, not that guy. So he grabs another guy and just starts punching at him and so on and keeps going through to the point just causes this like huge riot like in the stands and everything like that. And then later on the cops come to arrest him. You know, Paul Newman opens the door. He's like, "Oh man, the fucking cops are here," or whatnot. And they're like, "Oh, the cops are here? Well, bring them on in." And then it's like they go to jail and everything like that. And they're like so happy about it, like they're in jail and whatnot. And then like they finally get bailed out, and they kind of go, "Hell, well, thanks, officers. Thanks for having us here." He's like tries to shake the guy's hand and everything, like it was the greatest of experiences.
Well, there's also like the whole team stands out. Like, there's the one part where I think the character wasn't Killer, but I think it was the character who was what was it? Drawing a blank on the guy's name here. But when they have to do the auction thing to help sell themselves off, the one guy's like, "You know what? I fucking hate this suit. I'm gonna go out there and I'm gonna show my dick. I'm gonna wiggle my dick out, and everyone's gonna run away except my wife."
And then he goes on out there. And like nobody's like, "Oh yeah, whatever, Bob, you're not gonna do that." And the next thing you know, it goes off there in the distance. You don't see it, but you hear it. You just hear all these people screaming and yelling in panic.
Yeah. No, this movie just has like a bunch of fantastic, great moments throughout it. I think the character was Ned. I think that's who it was. character played by Michael. I'm gonna butcher this name. Antakeen. I think that's who it was. I think it was that character.
Huh.
Wait, no, Barden. No, that's my mistake. I'm confusing. Barden was the character who didn't want to get into fights. Ned Barden was the one that was against it. It was kind of interesting, that whole dynamic between Reggie, the Paul Newman character, and Ned Barden. Because they originally they seemed like they were kind of like, okay, I don't know why I always go to this Ocean's 11 dynamic. Whenever I see like the one guy, because, Paul Newman's clearly older than him, but they seem kind of like almost like at first glance, kind of like the same guy, just a little older, and like just attitude and opinion wise, like kind of like Danny Ocean and the Brad Pitt character from Ocean's 11. I kind of get that vibe when I first see him. I maybe just see it because Paul Newman just reminds me of George Clooney. Maybe that's why. But then all of a sudden, once Paul Newman's pushing for more fighting, for more sensationalism, that's where that character, where he seemed like he was like best friends with him, kind of goes to the wayside. And for a good majority of the movie, has his arms crossed, like, man, this guy turned into a bitch out of nowhere. But then it kind of gets to a part near the end, you're like, oh, I kind of get where he's coming from.
It's got that kind of thing where it's like, he's the character who likes like almost like as traditional hockey as you can get. And I know it's like towards like the late 60s and into the 70s and so on, people started realizing it's like that. I think they've probably always had fights in hockey, but probably it was so rare in the beginning that like it wasn't even thought of. It was just like, oh, well, they're just getting angry at each other, just like any sport. But then after a while, it's like, no, let this happen. Apparently the audience likes the fighting almost just as much as the hockey. And I think it just kind of did get to a point, especially in minor leagues when people are always trying to one up to try to get into like the NHL and so on. They start going even crazier, which mostly never seems to pan out well in the long run. But it almost is that kind of thing, is that guy's character is almost like he wants the traditional, like, let's win a game. We don't have to fight each other. We don't have to, like, take out different players. We don't have to cheap shot, use any tricks or anything like that. Just good old-fashioned sportsmanship, which generally to me, I'm always kind of like, yeah, sportsmanship. That sounds like the boring part of sports. Like, don't get me wrong, like, when I like hockey, I like it because you get two sports in one. You get hockey, and then you also get fist fighting.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Like,
let's talk about hockey, because there's always something going on. There's never like a dull moment in hockey. So I think I never really keep up with players or the team so much, but if a hockey game is on, I usually find myself watching it. So, because it's always moving, it's always fast. Maybe there is, but I never noticed the commercial breaks being as long as they are like in an NFL or a MLB game,
Mm-hmm.
So
plus, there's only 3 periods instead of like 4 innings or whatever, or 4 quarters, which makes it kind of that in itself makes it seem like it goes by much more fluidly.
Mm-hmm. And then there's the whole well, then you get to the part with his character to Braden, where you find out, because at first, like, what's his deal? Because he has this whole thing with his wife, and he sees his wife. He's in the car with his wife. He's like, "Oh, you're most beautiful girl." He's talking to this big old Saint Bernard, and the girl's like, he never gives me any attention. At first, you're just kind of like, what the fuck's wrong with this guy? You're thinking that for a while, and you're thinking, man, I came in liking this character, but now he's just this kind of guy who just always has his arms crossed, wants to play the game, and I can understand that part, but the fact that he's just being kind of like a dick to his wife and doesn't give her any, and just ignores her, but then it comes in at the end that's, you find out, and he says over the radio, he says, "You want to know why I'm doing all this? First off, hockey was my escape. Now it's just fighting all the fucking time, and fighting happens, but now it's just ran by fighting. And on top of that, you want a reason why I never give my wife, maybe this isn't the right thing, but like, you know what? I was sexually abused as a kid. So when that associates, like, oh shit, this got, so in this movie, I mean, it's not like out of place for this movie. It feels like it clicks in, but it goes from being like a lot of these really funny, like really hard-hitting lines to being like really like, oh shit, that actually got pretty real for a minute.
Yeah, that's what I kind of like about it too, is it still has some like good dramatic moments too to kind of keep it like well grounded and balanced and so on. But it also even had that thing too. It's like he really didn't notice his wife too, so she got the makeover. Like then it's like, oh, then she's okay. Once she stops looking like a dude, it's okay. Maybe that was it. She's like, well, if she stopped dressing like my uncle, it wouldn't be so bad.
Well, maybe that's what it is too. Well, also I feel like it was one of those things like that caught his attention. Maybe it was probably 2 things, because it implied that she drank a lot and she was always just kind of hanging out. So, and he would throw her a little attention, but it seemed like it was kind of like a 2-way street in that aspect. And And Paul Newman is always very forward. Like, I'm not entirely sure with his character if he is trying to fuck her at some point or is he just trying to, like, be friends with her. It's kind of hard to entirely say. I kind of get the vibe because she reaches the point where she full on comes to his house like, no, I got to play the game tonight. I can't fucking do that. If we were hanging out last night, maybe, but no. I tell you what, here's my ex-wife. You guys hang out.
Yeah, I know exactly. It's just like, hey, I was asking for that the other night. Now you showed up here at my doorstep, and just like she just starts bringing in all her stuff. Mm-hmm.
Well, even that character though, I'll say the Braden character for a minute. I was like, I went from liking this character not liking him, but I guess you kind of need like someone from to push against on their side other than the manager character. But as it went on, though, I'm like, actually, no, I get it, and that's actually kind of a good thing. The way they brought it around, it made a lot of sense why the character would be that way.
No, yeah, and I like how it's like even it's like at the very end, it's like when if they're playing the game and at first Paul Newman's like, okay, you know what, enough of this fighting. We're getting to the very end. We're gonna play it straight. We're gonna do it right. But the other team just brings in every single goon that they can find known to mankind. So it almost just doesn't work out that way. And then that Braden character kind of goes out. It's like, well, what's he going to do? He's going to join in the fights and everything like that? Everybody's just punching each other. There's like no hockey even being played. And he just goes out there and just does like this kind of like skating on ice striptease thing. And it's almost like his way of saying like, look, we just gotten so ridiculous. Here we go. I'm going to do something even more ridiculous just to do it. You know what I mean? Why not?
And that character that punched out, he was almost kind of like the main villain of the other team. Geron McCready, that character. Do you know
the
what
McCracken guy?
McCracken, that's his name. Do you know what that guy went on to inspire?
Well, they used that McCracken guy who was Paul D. Anantos or whatever his name was. He's in a handful of movies and action stuff along the way, but they used that guy as a reference for Wolverine.
Yeah, and that is so fitting. After I read that, I was looking that up. I'm like, oh my god, that clicks in perfectly. It makes sense, being he's Canadian and all that too. So
yeah,
well, I'm assuming he's Canadian. I'm just assuming because he had a hockey stick.
Yeah,
it's not the best assumption.
Even though this was like more like everything was like in Philadelphia kind of area, New York section. So it's like that type of hockey. You know, not like I guess Canadian hockey. There's a couple like French Canadian guys on the team and so on.
Well, even the beginning, when they have the one French-Canadian guy and the guy with a very thick accent, and he's like just going to the announcer saying, yeah, that's you have the hook. You don't do this, you don't do that, and he's kind of lightly beating the announcer next to him, and then we actually go into the game. That already lets you know what you're in for.
I thought that was like a really good intro for a movie, because that right there was like, boom. It just told you exactly what type of movie you were coming into.
Yeah, Yvonne Beretti, who plays Dennis, I thought that was just perfect for that opening. And then next thing you know, you already know what these guys are going to be like as soon as you get in the team. Because he has this like, you don't ever do that. You don't ever do that. But sure enough, we see that like within that first game there that's happening.
Yeah, exactly. And then it's like, the other thing too is this movie actually has a lot of like real hockey players in it. So I guess if you were totally into hockey in the 70s, you could like point these guys out left and right. You know, when you're kind of watching it in hindsight, like 40 years later, especially when you're not really into the sports as much, like, you know, the knowledge and the stats and the characters and so on. But it's like even like, you know, the Hanson brothers, those guys are all real hockey players. A lot of the guys around it, a lot of the backing characters are, and so on. So it's like that's kind of cool in itself just to have a bunch of real like athletes just kind of like in the movie mixed alongside, and it works out totally fine.
Another thing this movie does is I'm surprised how it, you know, despite how like macho it is, it actually goes on and speaks on you know, for the time had to be pretty controversial aside from the language, spoke on like gay relationships, because there's a part where Paul Newman is sleeping with this other lady other than his wife, and yet she tells him that she had like a gay experience and this and that, and he's like, well, no, I mean, and it actually sounds like a pretty real conversation. He says like, well, first off, it's just, I mean, I could see how a lady could be like another lady because women have this figure. I see guys in the locker room all the time, and it's just not my thing. It was just this very real conversation, and you find out that lady that her husband beat her because he was like, if you're a dyke, does that make me a fag or something like that? And he uses that against them when they actually play against them like the next night. And he says like, your wife sucks, pussy! I know! And they use that as their advantage to get a shot in there. And that's where he says like, wow, this sensationalism. Because first he's like, fuck this guy, because this is a really awesome lady. Who cares if she slept with another woman at some point? This woman is fucking awesome. So fuck this guy. Goes for it, makes the shot, and then oh wow, this works. We got to do that. And this team that just is always kind of near the bottom. And I should also mention Reggie, the Paul Newman character. He's not only is he like a player, he's also the head coach of the team. So he's like, we got to change up our style. We got to start moving in and try to start more shit. And that's where these Hanson brothers are like, these guys are really good at it. But like you said, they're like these guys with these clear anger issues. But like as soon as like they're done getting into a fight, they're all happy. Like as soon as like they're leaving the police station, like, all right, officer, you have a good day. They're trying to shake his hand, like, don't shake my hand.
No, I like that too. And even going back to talking about the guy on the other team with the lesbian wife, I like when he goes like when Paul Newman goes in the locker and he's all like. He's like, yeah, that his wife over there, she's a dyke or whatever and stuff. And then one of the guys in the locker is all like, does that make him a fag?
He's like, probably.
Yeah, they just like knock. And it's like those ones like those. That's like that kind of humor where somebody nowadays would be like, oh my gosh, that is so terrible. Like they're using the word fag and everything like that. But it's like, I'll say this. If you've ever been in a sports locker in like the 90s or the 2000s, it was still the same thing, but it's just like, that was just kind of like, it's joke talk. It's not like serious. I don't like to use the word locker room talk because that just sounds like that's Donald Trump. But I mean, I know exactly what he's talking about when he says that. That's what it is. Just that kind of guy talk. It's not
You're
like serious.
Siding with Donald Trump? You can't side anything he says. That is horrible, Spencer.
Exactly. See, fuck those people. Because here's the thing. At the end of the day, that's just kind of like what it is. It's just like it's just guys talking. You know what I mean? It's not same thing that women do too. They talk and everything like that. It doesn't mean that it's like real. The problem is when you get to the point where you have a character that's literally driving around in like a pickup truck wearing a Leatherman jacket doing a fag drag. That's when it's an issue.
And it's presented as a good thing.
Yeah, presented as a good thing. But if it's just guys making jokes, and I think the thing about this movie too is like even though they joke about that kind of stuff like that, it's still those characters are still like fine with like being gay and everything like that too. Like that doesn't like bother them. You know what I mean? It's not like these characters are homophobic or anything. So I almost feel like the movie even defends itself and its own jokes, if that makes sense.
Well, there's even their publicist who for a while it's just like, what's this guy's deal? And it's because he's like, why the fuck's the old man here? He's like this guy that he's always trying to put him through this stuff. He's like, I'm not fucking doing this. And
yeah.
When Paul Newman's trying to get the team more on like a proper trail, and this guy wants to make it more family friendly and oriented, he's just like, yeah, family friendly. You mean after that one game where I came up to your apartment, or not your apartment, but your room, and you were wearing a zebra. It's kind of funny, but also kind of like kind of meant to be a little dramatic at the same time. You're wearing a zebra print jockstrap and nipple tassels, and you're coming on to me, and it gets very intense. Like, you said, like, yeah, I almost tricked myself into thinking it didn't happen, but let's remember who really runs this team. Is a light threat. Then he just walks out. I'm like, oh, that's fucking Paul Newman.
Exactly, dude. Paul Newman just like kills it in this movie, like almost like more than almost any Paul Newman movie I've ever seen. Like, I really want some of these quotes that he says to be on like a Newman's Own bottle. Like when you buy it, we're like, oh, I'm getting some balsamic vinegar dressing, and then just it like has a quote from Slapshot on there or something.
Well, I always liked him, even like I mean. The only Paul Newman movie I can think of, and he's not like he's not like a Clint Eastwood. I can't like name like 20 Paul Newmans off top Paul Newman movies off top of my head. Like I can't a Clint Eastwood. But every time I see Paul Newman in the movie, he always crushes it. I don't like The Towering Inferno, but he's great in that movie. Mm-hmm. So that's the only one I could think of that I don't like. Even in Road's Perdition, the part where he's beating up Daniel Craig, he's just like, I fucking curse the very fucking day you were born! He's like beating his own son, Daniel Craig, before he's 007. He's like, sorry, Dad. He's like, it'll be okay. I'll protect you from Tom Hanks. Which is something you never think you heard somebody say.
Yeah, exactly. Well, it's like, Paul Newman has like big movies like, The Hustler in the 60s, and then he's got Cool Hand Luke, of course, The Sting, Color of Money in the 80s, and so on. He's got that like, yeah, I'll say it's like the list I don't know nearly as like hard as like maybe like Clint Eastwood or a thing like that, but he is one of those actors that like whenever you do something he's in though, he really does know how to like own a movie like really well. Like almost more than you almost kind of forget how well he does until you like kind of rewatch some of his films.
Yeah. And in this movie, he just crushes it because he has this like rough and tumble vibe to him, and they even make a point like, this like because at one point there's the character, I believe it's the character Killer says, actually we're not gonna lie. There's that point where like, all right, which one? Because there's like 3 or 4 guys all with like Fu Manchus and like thick mustaches. Like, wait, which one was that? They all stand out, but it's like, look at it like look at their IMDb pictures. Like, which one was that one again? I'm trying to remember. I think it was maybe Killer or maybe the guy who played One Shock or whatever.
Well, that's why one of them wore a helmet, because he's like, literally, we look too similar, so I got to put a helmet on. Which that's the other thing too. I kind of forgot. It's like, oh yeah, I guess like even by the 70s, nobody was really wearing helmets yet, except for the goalie.
Actually, you know what? I think it was Alan F. Nicholas who played Upton. I think that was the character. There's a part where he says like, because they were all talking about the team like being traded and all that, and we didn't mention a big part of it. Paul Newman makes up the story about, hey guys, you don't gotta get worried. We're gonna be. He like lies to their to this friend of ours who's a sports writer. He says like, just tell them you got from an outside source that we're being bought up by Florida. We're being bought up by Florida. We got a fan basis there. I'm like, oh, cool, awesome. We're some nice town in Florida. Yep, some nice town in Florida. Then to find, so people get their spirit back up and they're getting more into the game. And then before that happens, though, the character Upton, he's kind of like, you know what? I kind of wish I got more into education. I mean, look at Reggie. He's one of these guys who he just loves to fight. He loves to play hockey, but he doesn't need it. He's smart. He's that's the thing I like so much about this character that Paul Newman plays, because he is a real tough guy, but at the same time, he could walk into a room in a nice suit and just feel like he fits there as well.
Yeah, I know. He's always got those cool like leather suits on, like those 70s ones in this
very
movie.
70s. The suit he's wearing when he goes to the team owner, who just like basically the whole thing, I like what he says, like, all this team is this lady is a tax write-off.
I know. That's just how she looks at it, which is kind of like true. I mean, like, in her book, it's going to cost more money to keep something around like that than it is just to get rid of it. But it's more the thing. It's like, hey, this team is like, this is what this town kind of has. This town has nothing. You know what I mean? And even that was based off like a real thing too, because apparently the team, what was it? It was the Jets. Mm-hmm. It was like the Johnstown Jets, because the movie has, they're called the Chiefs, but they're almost called, what are they called?
I think they're called the Chiefs in this movie.
No, they're called the Chiefs. But they're called, the town is called, it's not Johnstown, but it's almost like something very similar. It's like another something town like that. It's just like a spin-off of like their own name. But that team, the Jets, even kind of folded as this movie was kind of being made, which is where they got a lot of the players from.
Well, I could see that too, because I mean, as I was watching this movie, I'm like, there's probably so many nods and winks to people who know their hockey history. And whenever Kevin Smith talks about making Hit Somebody or hockey movies he loves, he always refers to Slapshot, and I definitely see that. And I could even see like other more PG hockey movies kind of pulling from this, not just from like Mighty Ducks. I saw a little bit, not a whole lot of Mighty Ducks. There's no part of like, there's
put
no
a cock in your mouth, you little faggot.
Beat me to the joke. Yeah, there's no part where what's his name?
Emilio Estevez.
Emilio Estevez says that to the kid in the cowboy hat, like, only 2 things come from Texas:
stairs and queers.
Earl Harvey walks in.
Well, what's a movie that kind of captures the Slapshot vibe and feel, and it's a modern one, and it's actually really good. Did you ever see Goon?
I love that movie. I haven't seen the sequel, but
the sequel I thought was actually still pretty good too. Like, maybe not nearly as classic, but like I still enjoyed it almost just as much.
I feel like we could have done. At one point in time, I was almost pitching we do Goon. I was like, oh, maybe another time. We're doing this. Maybe we will do Goon. But I want to say on Goon, because I think the whole time I was watching this, like, all right, this definitely inspired Goon. Goon still has his own personality, because this is almost like, it's kind of like half and half on what the Goon is on hockey. It's kind of like, this movie seems kind of like, it's kind of necessary, but it shouldn't overtake hockey. Where Goon is more of a romanticizing of it. Yeah,
because it's almost like he's almost like a man from out of time. Like the Goons that are not nearly as popular, which probably is true, because they probably got You know, you watch a hockey game nowadays and there still is fighting, but I bet you it's like they've probably still toned it down just like every other sport. You know, so though it's still there, it's probably not like, I bet you it's one of those ones, if you probably would have watched hockey in the 70s, it probably would have been very common.
Well, there's even that part where, I'll say this on Goon. The part that just makes you love Sean William Scott's character so much, he's one of those guys, he's dumb as fuck, but he is so sincere and so honest. And there's that part where he realized that he was like in a relationship where the lady was cheating on her husband, and the guy wasn't a bad guy, and he realized that. And I can't help but almost get like sad. The part when he goes to him, it's like, what's such a good scene. He goes to the guy to say he's sorry for having his wife cheat on him, and then he's just punching, he's just wailing on him, and he's just crying, saying, I'm sorry, as this guy's punching in his fucking face and does not fight back. Like, that movie, this movie, I mean, it was already good, but that part just stole my heart right there.
No, totally. I definitely agree there. And you know what's the other interesting thing, though, is also Slapshot has 2, like, sequels that came out, like, in the 2000s.
Oh, boy, yeah.
Which sounds, like, at first I'm like, oh, these are probably going to be kind of, like, simple or whatnot, but they have the Hanson brothers in both of them. Now, I don't know if that's just, like, a cameo or something like that, but that almost in itself would be worth watching just for them alone.
I saw there's one that came out in 2002, and the other was like 2005 or something like that. I'll say, why so soon? That's my question. Maybe there was another hockey movie that came out around that time, which like people gotta remember Slapshot. Maybe it was on its like anniversary or something like that.
Well, didn't Miracle come out in 2000 or 2001?
That's a good point.
I bet you that did it.
Miracle's a good movie. I really enjoyed Miracle.
I like that one too. I remember like my friend back in the day, like he was like, "Oh, that movie's terrible. It's just this movie where they're all anti-Russian and everything like that." It's like,
well, it's the Cold
okay, well,
War,
no,
so.
it's like, yeah, because they're a team, they want to beat Russia. Yes, I do get that, but he made it out like they're fucking Russians are just a bunch of dirty rats.
Well, it's like we don't really have the best history with Russia, and I'm not. I mean, I'll say I made some pretty good friends here in the city that are Russian, so I'm not gonna be like fuck Russia. But it's one of those things like I get if you have a movie set in the Cold War. Why? I mean, don't get me wrong, America's did some shady shit too, but I mean, if you have a movie set in the Cold War in the Olympics, I get why you go to Russia as your villain. Makes sense, especially since if you're going historically, Russia had a good record of winning all the hockey championships back then. Them in Canada, you know.
Well, that was the whole reason of Miracle, was that it's been so long since America won or somebody beat the Russians, and that's the whole story of it. But like, yeah, you watch that movie, it's like, okay, the Russians are just Russians. They're not like they're like evil. Like, I don't know. Like, I expected them to come across like they become like super evil. Like, you know, just make them as like almost like a stereotypical like propaganda film from like that time period. But it's like, no, it's not like that really. I mean, I know it's Disney, so obviously it's going to have a little bit more like heart towards Americans. Like, they, you know, live and breathe a little bit more realistic than the Russians do. But no, that movie's really good. But that's probably what sparked them finally to say, hey, let's do a Slapshots 2. Actually, Universal wanted to make a sequel, like a spin-off sequel. There was like a Hanson Brothers movie in the 70s, but they just decided to go back to hockey.
Yeah, I can definitely see that. Because those guys, I got a feeling they didn't really even acting that much. I got a feeling that's probably how they really act. And just like, there's that scene where he says, hey guys, your room's in here. They're always talking amongst themselves. You can't even always pick up on everything they say. And then when he goes in and looks, he says, what the fuck? He sees they have all these slot car toys. He's like, they brought fucking toys with them. Better they play with toys than themselves. They're a bunch of fucking retards.
He's like, yeah, we just don't want them jerking off.
That was another part. The part where the guy was going off on like, he says, remember that one guy? He couldn't help himself. He loved jerking off so badly that he would almost intentionally get penalties just so he can go sit in the box and whack it, make old ladies in the area leave. Like, that seems like something, that doesn't sound like something you'd hear in a movie in 77. That seems like 90s at minimum, you know?
And even 90s sounds like you wouldn't even see it till maybe later in the 90s. Like, 'cause that joke right there makes like ones like, and there's something about Mary seem almost very tame. You know what I mean?
Well,
like,
even by today's standards, this movie doesn't seem like it's so raw and raunchy, but at the time though, I mean, there's a couple of jokes. It's mainly just kind of like, all right, how frequently they say fag, and how the part where I think the biggest joke is where he says like, don't be surprised if one day that you walk in, that boy has a cock in his mouth. He's talking about like a 7-year-old kid. Like, I think that is the most edgiest part of the movie. But I'm not saying that is a bad thing. I mean, it's just one of those things for when this movie came out, like, God, I can't think, because I have a lot of movies set in the 70s and back, or that came out in the 70s and back, and I can't think of anything that has that level of, dialogue or language.
Well, that's the perfect example, because there's always people out there that go, oh, well, old comedies just aren't funny. It's like, if you weren't there for them, they're just not funny. This is a perfect example of going like, no, watch this. If you don't find this movie funny, because I don't see how there's like nothing like unrelatable in it. Like it's not like it's doing like jokes of like 1977 that you'd only get if you like watched the news in 1977. Like, no, this movie like holds up so well. Everything in it like works for this day and age and so on. Other than the fact that if you just can't handle hardcore humor, that's about the only thing. Is this movie does have that kind of humor that soft people won't be able to take it. And that's where I feel like that's what makes this movie kind of edgy for nowadays, is that it has jokes in it that you even in like a movie that was trying to be as raunchy as possible probably still couldn't get away with.
Yeah, well, plus this movie seems very real about it. It doesn't feel like it's trying to piss you off. I honestly feel like these are all real people that are saying this shit in the locker room, and like a big chunk of the cast is real hockey players. So,
well, it's that. It's like, because the only thing about science, modern movies nowadays almost like it's like the problem I have a lot of comedies is that they try so hard. They don't feel real. They've like they just try to one up the next guy's like comedy movie, and in that process, it's almost like they've lost like what it means to be something that's like sustainable and like what you could be. Like Slapshot, those jokes are all like real feeling. Like I can understand those jokes and so on. It's not like they're just trying to do the thing where it's like somebody keeps throwing a joke left, right, left, right, left, right, left, right, and just keeps stacking on top of each other. Code, okay, it's so ridiculous and out there, let's just do it. That's how I feel like a lot of Seth Rogen movies are. It's like they just try so hard to be as raunchy as possible, and almost that makes movies less funny in my opinion. Because it's like, well, that doesn't feel real now. Now you sort of lost me, because now you're just doing it just to be almost extreme, almost kind of like what later Family Guy episodes almost became like too, where they just tried almost too hard to try to one up, the previous jokes and the previous shows and so on.
Yeah, and this right here, I feel like everything about it, like it's not even just like how much language they have. It's also a lot of just editing jokes. And kind of like the more lingering, awkward stuff that you see in a lot more British comedy. And I don't know if this movie was intending to have like, ape any British humor, but you just see a lot of that like more just lingering, kind of like just awkward silences. Like there's like for instance, there's a part I mentioned where the one guy's like, I just want to let you know I got my eye on, like it's a couple of things. That joke works on a couple levels. There's the part where the Hanson brothers get into a fight before the Pledge of Allegiance, and then suddenly we cut to the national anthem, and they're all just standing there bloody. It's showing all three of them bloody. And then you have this long part where the ref keeps on looking over his shoulder behind him, like making sure they're not about to start another fight. He skates over and walks up to one of them and just says, I'm on to you guys, and you better not stop. I'm trying to listen to the fucking song! And I know that, and then he just slowly turns back around. And we just cut to the next scene. It's like there's no it's like after the punchline it just kind of lingers. Like I know I already made that example earlier, but I mean that scene right there, I think Ape has like an example of like all the humor that works. This lingering silence, the awkward comedy, and then just the abrupt like fuck shit man, that works, that kind of hits you on the caveman instinct.
Is that, and then it's like also it has a lot of those like hard cut kind of style jokes where like you go from one scene to another. I don't have an example like off the top of my head, but you kind of remind me of like it did have like those like ones where it's like it could be one scene and then it'll like hard cut to something else, and that's almost like what makes it kind of funny is what the next scene goes to and what it jumps in.
Well, the example I can think of that is they're saying, you know what, we're gonna play it like real hockey. We're gonna do this like real hockey. And that's when they're going against their rival team that has all those goons, and each one of them almost seems like, I mean...
They're all like characters in themselves.
I was about to say that myself. Yeah, they're all like almost like they seem like bosses out of a video game. You have the Native American guy who says like, "Can you use it?" Like you already know who all these guys are. Like he was forbidden playing hockey in Toronto, and that's a lot for being only 21. Then another guy rolls in, Native American guy who calls all his opponents scalps and calls his hockey stick the tomahawk. Like all like this very over the top shit. It's like how the fuck are we gonna play against these guys? You see a couple of rounds of them just getting smacked and knocked around. And then they're like, we're trying to play it real. We're trying to play it real. And that's when the publicist comes in, like, what the fuck are you doing? They're here to see the hardest hitting players in the team, in the league. That not you guys. I don't know what the fuck you guys are doing. There's scouts out there. He walks out and like, Paul Newman just stops like, Scouts? An abrupt cut of them just punching and kicking the fuck out of the other guys.
And then it goes just, it shows what's his name just sitting there, arms crossed, like not even playing anymore because it's like, oh, I thought we were playing this serious.
The actor, Michael Dunigan.
Yeah.
And then his character, Barden,
there we go. Yeah. It's just like, just that kind of stuff too. It's just like, scouts, we're all back to fighting again and everything like that.
And I like even the ref is like, I don't even fucking know. They're all just fighting. What the fuck are we going to do? There's just like one big fight. And then once he does his striptease, the McCracken guys are like, this isn't hockey. That's disgusting. Fucking knock it off. This isn't hockey. Like, what you guys are doing now isn't hockey. Chill the fuck out. And then he says, I'm not stomping it. This is more civil than what you guys are doing. And then he punches the ref. He says, all right, you guys lost. And they're like, we won? We fucking won! Like, that's what made them win.
Yeah. That's not like, it's got that kind of thing where it's like, that guy it's that sort of thing that like, the guy who all he does is punch people in hockey gets offended by the guy who's now doing figure skating striptease in hockey. And I like how that to him is just like his offensive thing. Like, what the fuck are you doing?
Well, I think it's also one of those things of like how... Because I think it is definitely stating on how it's almost becoming more of a sideshow than an actual game. And I liked how the movie, I think it's almost kind of more of like him finding that middle ground. Because that's kind of like, that character kind of needed that moment. Because for a while, it's like, oh yeah, this guy, he's like the new blood. He's kind of like what Paul Newman used to be back in his day. And then he's just like arms crossed, like what the fuck? And Paul Newman's just almost kind of following the trend. Like, yeah, the trend is what's going to get us going. The trend's what's going to make us fucking last. And
that's what's making him win too, though.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I like how that character has that moment at the end, and it's almost kind of like. I think, maybe I'm not trying to sound all like artsy about it or anything, but I think it's also him because like I said earlier, they say that he was sexually abused and he's kind of afraid of sex. So him coming in and doing like a striptease is almost him kind of like not only sort of facing his fears, but kind of going the opposite direction other than fighting. So it's kind of like, not to sound all cliche, but I guess maybe kind of go, love over violence kind of thing. Maybe, I don't know.
Yeah, I kind of see what that's supposed to be. I think it was just more like almost to like, it's just supposed to be, I'm going to do something even more ridiculous than you guys, and watch, they'll cheer for me still. And I think that's almost kind of what it was. And similar to like how hockey had this issue, I know that wrestling kind of had that too. Like in the 90s, that was where like a lot of older guys almost turned away from wrestling because they're like, oh, they're not really even wrestling anymore. Now they're just hitting each other over with chairs and barbed wire. And, once it got to like brutal, like ECW style backyard wrestling stuff, and even once that came into like WWE and WCW and so on, like that became a turnoff to a lot of the old guys that just wanted to watch straight up wrestling. You know what I mean? And I think that's probably how it was. There's probably like a certain audience that was just like, oh, they're not really even playing hockey anymore. Now it's just turning into like punch fest.
Yeah.
And I think with hockey, it is true. Like, I think the punching and the fighting is a total must. I think if that went away in hockey, it would definitely lose a lot of my interest. But I think it's also got to be sort of reserved. It's almost like, I'll use this as an example. It's like screaming in metal music. You can't scream all the time or else it just gets old really fast. But if you savor it and you use it at certain parts, it can make a song really awesome.
That's why I think a lot of screamo shit really wore itself thin, like 2008 and 2006 through the 2009.
Yeah, and I think that's almost like perfect analogy to go along with Slapshot, is that if you have your hockey going to the point where all it is people throwing punches and now nobody's even really playing a game anymore, then like what is it really now?
Yeah. And I think this movie, even like for a good portion of the movie, it almost seems more of like the shenanigans these guys get into, and there's very lightly kind of a spine keeping it in track, making it. I don't mean that in a bad way, but I mean that like it's more of just like a day in the life of these guys. Oh, by the way, this thing's kind of going on in the background, and at the very end, that is what comes into the final act, and that's their driving force. Once they realize, oh shit, we're totally gonna get sold off. We're not even gonna get. She's gonna just close the team. She's not even gonna sell us. So, I think that kind of works for some of these. Sometimes I hear people complain about that kind of like it's kind of like it's not like a rise and fall success story like Wolf of Wall Street. But I heard someone complain about Wolf of Wall Street saying, you know what, there's barely a main consistent story. I mean, yeah, there is sort of a rise and fall thing, but it's mainly just the adventures of these guys, and then at the very end, like, oh wait, all this shit happens, which brought it down. Like, oh yeah, that's kind of what this movie is, but I don't think that's a problem. I kind of like that every once in a while.
And I'll say this, I actually probably like that type of storytelling more than the other type, than the, I guess your regular one. And this one's more almost just like watching a team. I guess it does have a little bit of a rise, but it's almost like a team that starts off at the very beginning. It's one of the lower end teams out of all like the minor league hockey. And then, boom, this factory, that's pretty much the one thing that sort of supports this team. It's pretty much what gets all the people into the stands. It's what almost even, sponsors it and so on, is going away. So now the team's going to go, so they got their one final season. And in this final season, they kind of find a new way to sort of, like, play this game, is to, start, like, messing people up. And in that process, they started to become popular again, but then realize at the end that the team's going to go away no matter what. And they just decide in that last game, they're like, at first it's like, hey, we'll just play it. If this is our last game, and Paul Newman says, I'm going to retire at this point and so on, this is it. Let's just go on out. We'll say we played the game fair and square and so on, until the scouts show up, and then it's like, scouts!
Well, that's what I also like about it, because I'm not going to lie, when Paul Newman said that, I was almost like, well, that kind of puts down everything you guys are doing throughout this whole movie. So then when they actually say, like, wait, there's scouts, and they start punching everybody, I'm like, okay, so the goon isn't this thing that should be shamed upon, but it shouldn't be this thing that overtakes the game. And that's what I liked about that. It's this thing that meets in the middle ground. And when you actually explain it the way you did, I actually do see a little bit more of a story there, but the way it presents itself, it just seems more of kind of like situational. Like, here's what happened in this game. These guys got into a fight. This part's kind of funny. And like, I like even that we got there's another scene where it just shows like the camaraderie of all these guys. Like, they're all in the bar, they're all just hanging out, and they're very intently watching this soap opera, and everyone's just dead silence. Yeah, there's the part where she's like, you were in the coma, so I made the decision for you. Like, that right there is a cunt.
Yeah, I love that part, because that part really is like one of those ones where it's like it had nothing to do with like the movie at all, but it was like I felt like just these characters, just like how in depth they kind of got in on their kind of like off time of the game.
Well, that's also, I think those scenes that actually have no real. I mean, shortly after that, there is a part that moves the story forward because he drops some news on him that like the team is not getting sold off, or not getting sold off, but there's something about the team, something important.
Well, that comes on right after it, but that scene kind of leading up the soap opera part just is kind of like the beginning to it.
Sometimes those scenes that have no real major part of the story, those sometimes let you know more about the characters or anything else. I think something like Jackie Brown has a lot of that. I think, all the small little conversations they have throughout that whole movie, just, small things, like when Lewis is all like, she's like, hey man, go wait in the car, here, take this, put the beep beep, and then I'll open the car for you, don't mess with the volumes, like that kind of shit, like, because it says like, oh shit, he's been in jail so long, he doesn't know how this shit works.
Yeah.
And this movie has a lot of that kind of stuff in it.
No, and that is true. It's got a lot of that kind of like just like talking moments and so on. And even the other thing too, it's like I like the relationship that Paul Newman has with his wife, because I just feel like I don't think I've ever really seen something like exactly like that, how it like is in this movie, in any other kind of film or story, because it's almost this thing. It's like they're still married, but they've almost been separate for so long they just didn't get around to actually getting a divorce. So it's kind of like they can casually run into each other almost like friends and it'll be fine, but it's almost like they're not enough to go back into the relationship, but they almost kind of both are sort of fine with it in the same time too. Like Paul Newman sort of would like to get back together, but at the same time, if that doesn't work out, it's not like the worst thing, but he even keeps joking. He's like, once I make it, we get back together. Don't you worry about it.
And she's kind of like, maybe. Like, she's kind of leaning kind of like, no, I don't think so. I got my own plans. I got my own things I want to do. But at that exact same time, she still kind of has, she gets some of the charm to him. She's like, I remember why I liked this guy in the first place. And I really like that. Because at first I'm like, oh, is he just cheating on his wife? All right, here's a plot that's going to come in and kind of fuck him over later. And then later he calls, like, shit, someone else is there? Fuck, whatever. And then later he sees her. They don't even bring that up. It's like they both kind of know that they're fucking other people. It's just like, yeah, we just never got around to filling out those divorce papers. Not a big deal.
Yeah, well, it's almost like they're not technically together. It's just they left the marriage part still intact. It's just like, it probably is like one of those ones where it's like, you know what? It's just easier just not to divorce. Like, whatever. You know? At the end of the day, we can still do our taxes this way or something like that. You know what I mean?
I like the part when this is also just says a lot about like those hard cut jokes, those hard like cut editing jokes. Like you see those people out there like all angry, like we don't want this team in our town. Fuck you, get out of here. And then as they go by, because they have such a dedicated fan basis, because since the thing shut down, they got people literally following them wherever they go now. So it's like a school bus filled with people, and as they go by this crowd protesting with like damn near pitchforks and torches, they all just have their asses out the window. Just utter silence takes the whole crowd and just stare, and then cut on to the next scene.
Yeah, that was just great. Just like they can't even handle it.
And like going back to like Paul Newman, just like some of the way he handles some of the lines, like when McCracken says to him like, you know, you put a head on a bounty on me? Yep, $100 of my own money to which one of my guys gets you. He says like, yeah, you're a real cocksucker. It's like, as much as I can get, and just walks out.
Yeah. There's so many...
I don't know why I keep saying Steve McQueen. He just seems like, Paul Newman just seems like one of those Steve McQueen type guys.
Well, really, for
Paul
like,
Newman,
at that time period, I like, because there's always those kind of actors that I feel that can kind of go back and forth. Like, you know, I always said Johnny Depp and Gary Oldman, almost, you could pretty much reverse any of their roles and it would work. And I feel like Steve McQueen and Paul Newman are kind of like that. Like, you could see Paul Newman in The Getaway, and you could see, you know, Steve McQueen and Butch Cassidy, the Sundance Kid. It would still make sense.
I think I'm going more off the characters they play, because Steve McQueen is a lot more of a solemn, more badass, and Paul Newman is a lot more of a, hey guys, let's get a beer kind of character, and just really likable. I feel like if you had to hang out with one of them, Paul Newman would be more fun, but I guarantee Steve McQueen would be pretty cool too.
Yeah.
That whole part though, regarding that, what part was I going to say? The part as much as I can, what was we were talking before that? There's some example I was gonna make.
There's something about it. It was one of the hard cut kind of jokes, but I don't remember.
Hard cuts. They put the bounty on the guy's head. It'll come back to me later. All right.
Did you see that Charlie Watts was in the movie playing drums?
I was gonna remember what I was gonna say. This is apparently up to his death. This was still one of his favorite movies he's ever filmed.
Oh yeah, yeah. Paul Newman said it was totally awesome, and he said that he never really swore a whole lot beforehand. And then after this movie, it took him 10 years to kind of come off of that.
Oh god, I'm just so glad we saw this movie, because you said I got a couple movies here that I think we might want to do for the show. I'm like, Slapshots, I've heard of that, and it's a hockey movie. Yeah, sure, let's check it out. Then I'm just so glad I saw this movie. It
almost became, it's like once I watch it, it's like, God, this is like an instant classic. I could see throwing this on any time, and it would always be good. It's like that perfect one to just toss on. As I said, it's like, I would say for anybody who and I use Happy Gilmore, because Happy Gilmore is probably the closest thing I can think of in a modern movie that we know that most people have seen. It's like, if you really liked Happy Gilmore, I think Slapshot is the movie that's check that out now, because I'll even say Happy Gilmore feels like a PG-13 version of Slapshot, because it kind of goes for, that kind of yelling humor, the violence. I mean, he's a hockey player, but instead he goes golfing instead, but it has almost that same feeling. Almost Happy Gilmore, that character, feels like he could have been a part of the team of Slapshot.
I want to say there's even a review on Happy Gilmore, best sports comedies since Slapshot. So.
Yeah, exactly. So it could be like that. But did you hear when I said there was? Did you see Charlie Watts in the movie though?
Who was Charlie Watts?
When there was that scene, when they're at, I guess it was a hotel, maybe a hotel bar or something like that. There was that band playing. He was playing drums on there. That's
fitting.
I just thought it's so random. I was like, wait, that looks like Charlie Watts, and then I looked it up. It's like, oh my god.
I'll be honest. If Charlie Watts is not standing next to Mick, Keith, Ronnie, and Bill, and if he's not standing next to all them, then I'm kind of like, I probably wouldn't be looking for him. Not to be a dick. I
Well,
mean,
he just has that weird looking face because he always has that face. That's like
Yeah.
the best way I can describe it because he's always he looks so different. Like he almost doesn't even look like he belongs in the Rolling Stones. He looks like a guy just happened to show up.
Charlie Watts, not to bring him down, because Charlie Watts is a total fucking badass.
Oh, yeah.
I'm not gonna lie. I mainly my favorite member of the Rolling Stones is probably Mick Jagger, more for his writing and singing. But just to keep it, just to clarify and make up what I said about Charlie Watts in a second ago, there's this one story, and this even seems like a scene that would be in Slapshots, just something similar to this. One night, Mick Jagger and Keith Richards were partying really hard, and it was like 2 or 3 in the morning, and he just calls her one of the hotel rooms and says, "Hey guys, we're having a band meeting right now." And Charlie Watts is like, "It's 3 in the fucking morning. I want to sleep." She says, "No, I need to get my drummer up here." He's like, "Oh, you want your drummer up here? All right." Throws on a suit, walks in there, socks Mick Jagger in the fucking face. He almost falls to the window, grabs him by the collar, pulls him away from the window. He says like, "I'm not your fucking drummer. You're my fucking singer." Plops him down, walks out of the room.
And after that, we always knew our place.
That is a fucking hard ass right there. So don't get me wrong. I mean, Charlie. So I'm not bringing down Charlie Watts, but that right there though, I gotta look for that again now. Because that's. Yeah, I could totally see like Paul Newman just being friends with the Rolling Stones. Like, "Hey, what are you guys doing in town?" "Oh, we just got this show going on." Like, "Oh, want to be in a movie?" "Oh, Charlie does." "Okay."
Charlie, you guys want to be in a movie? Oh, Charlie does. Like, just everybody else answers for him.
Yeah.
Well, it's like one of those ones. Like one of my favorite things. I just love when bands kind of like appear in movies. Like in Dirty Harry 5, like when Guns N' Roses is in there. That just like makes my day. My favorite part too is I love how they're just literally dressed like Guns N' Roses. It's not like they're playing characters or anything. They like came off of like a music video and just showed up to like Dirty Harry. So it almost feels like slightly out of place, but.
Well, it's not even like they're doing anything in that scene. They're literally just standing in the background, and maybe I think it's Axel shoots a harpoon gun or
I
something.
think it's Slash is the one that shoots the harpoon gun.
Or like, yeah, one of them does, and none of them even say anything. They're just kind of standing there in the background. It's not like they were small when that came out, because then after that, maybe a little before, I think after that, you have that scene where Jim Carrey is lip syncing Welcome to the Jungle. So. That's already 2 things. Like, want to see a movie where Jim Carrey is playing like a cokehead and he's also lip singing "Welcome to the Jungle"? What? Oh yeah, Clint Eastwood's in it too.
And he's Dirty Harry.
And at some point they're running away. They're being chased by a little electric remote control car with a bomb on it. You got to slow down. I'm trying to process all this.
There's something special about that last Dirty Harry movie. Like, it's not the best of the Dirty Harry movies, but it definitely has reasons like why it makes it awesome.
Well, Liam Neeson's also, like, for a minute we think Liam Neeson's the bad guy, but then he's just this really pretentious director. Wait, Liam Neeson's in this fucking thing too? Yeah.
There's a lot going on in this film, I have to say, but... also in Slapshot, though, it does have a really good soundtrack, too, I will say.
Oh, yeah, I was digging the soundtrack.
Like, it was one of those movies just had, like, a lot of really good 70s tunes going along with it and so on. It just kind of like, even when they're just riding the bus and they're just, like they're gambling and whatnot, just kind of really gave that vibe and feel of like, almost like, because it's like that thing you kind of think about. It's like, sometimes there's like 2 types of sports worlds. You think of the sports world where it's like, look at me and my $1 million, I can do whatever I want. And then there's like the guys who are like, for the love of the game, like the minor league fellas who, they almost play sports like it's a blue collar job. Like at the end of the day, they're not making really any money, but they get to play hockey. You know what I mean? Like, they probably have a tiny apartment. They got just enough to get by, but they get to play hockey.
And that's why it's so important they get to stay on this team. Because the one guy just says, like, yeah, if this goes out, I guess working over at my brother-in-law's Chrysler dealership.
And that's probably the tough thing is, like, when you are, like, the minor league guys, the guys who are, like... And that's still saying that you're really good at the sport. You just weren't able to make it into, like, NHL or something like that. It's kind of tough because, as a sport, you can only go so long. You know what I mean? Like, because even, like, people, it's like, if somebody's in their 40s, it's like, oh, my God, that's like a senior citizen running around as far as sports are concerned. So you kind of max out in your 30s, which really is not that much. And if you're not making any money and you can't have enough money for, retirement and savings and so on, it's kind of like, at the end of the day, it's like you could become 35 and just be like, oh, shit, this is my only skill is, like, slapping a puck.
Yeah.
And punching people in the face.
And they get a point across, like, maybe you can get traded, Paul Newman. He's like, oh, look at me, I'm not a rookie anymore. I can't do that. So it kind of gets a point across, like, this is one of those things they love, but it's not a thing you can do forever. And that kind of makes it a little tragic. This thing, like, yeah, so if you don't make it big or maybe get some kind of, I'm not sure if sponsorship was a big thing back then, but if you don't pull it off while you're young, it's kind of hard to have real longevity out of it the further you go.
Uh-huh. And that's the thing, is like, I think that's what makes sports kind of tough, because, you know, you can take something like music or art, and you always hear those stories every once in a while where it's like, guy, it's like he played music his entire life, but it wasn't until he was 70 years old that he finally got his hit song, you know? And in music, you can a lot of times kind of get away with that. I mean, obviously, you're not going to be like a fucking like teen idol at 70 years old. Like, oh, Bob Williker up there, you know, that's the guy the kids want to be now. Looking like a gold painter and all, but
even the Chili Peppers, even they, like, I mean, they weren't like, they were still fairly young, but they were like, what, they came out like 82 or 83, the same year as Motley Crue, and they didn't get big. They didn't get big until, well, they got kind of more noticed with Mother's Milk, and they didn't get big until Blood Sugar Sex Magic, which that was like, I think 92 or 93, right?
Yeah, that was, 91, 92, somewhere. It's like that same year that, like, I think almost like all the big like grunge rock albums came out. But, I mean, like, I'll say this, like, they still were bigger than, like, what I was kind of talking about, because they still had albums, and those albums still were, like, had a label and so on. It wasn't, like, a guy just, like, I'm almost thinking of, like, more like those kind of bands where it's, like, they've never had, like, an actual, like, recording. Maybe if they have, it's just, like, they got, like, a tape recording that they made in a guy's basement and so on, and they just tour, like, that maybe kind of, like...
A very compressed audio file somewhere on YouTube, maybe.
Yeah, maybe. But I'm more even thinking like older people, so it's like they're like the kind of band that like you would show up to their concert and afterwards they'd have like recorded like tapes that you could buy.
I one time opened for Journey.
Yeah.
You too?
Yeah, one of those ones like, oh, and Bob Dylan. Well, actually, Bob Dylan just told me to get the fuck out of here, and well, that was like opening for him.
Get the fuck out of here. And he backhanded me with his harmonica.
Yeah, you fucking queer. It's like, oh, God, he called me a queer, too. I didn't think Bob Dylan had it in him, but he really didn't want me there. Well, what'd you do to Bob Dylan? Well, I did take his microphone and stick it down my pants.
I just thought maybe if I can get a little bit of his saliva on my dick, then maybe his genius would transfer to me. Like, well, why was that your first option? I don't know. There was a lot of drugs in the 70s.
You just did things. Yeah, did things. Well, at least I made it age 77, hit single. Fuck you, Bob.
Da-da-da-da-da.
But no, Slapshot, totally awesome movie. I'm glad finally I've checked that out. And I mean, as I said, like that's just kind of how it is. You know, you could go for the rest of your life and still find like hidden gem classics throughout the years and so on that. You know, it's almost that thing, like, if you stopped watching brand new movies from this day forward, you would never run out of movies to watch, you know?
I think this is one of those movies that, like, before when we were younger, I say it like as if it was like, back in the olden days.
Back in the olden days when we were wee young lads.
Well, back when we would, like, you know, when it was an arms race between us, going to the thrifts, going to the pawn shop and just buying, like, DVDs left and right. I think those are mostly behind me. So now it's just like, oh, I saw it on digital or it's on Netflix. I don't feel the need to go out and own it. Every so often there is a movie I really want to support that'll do that. And even though this movie would probably be easy to find, I wouldn't mind adding this to my own personal collection because I enjoyed it so much. This just seems like a movie I could just listen. It's kind of like I don't know if I love it as much as Departed, but like say something like Departed, Clerks, Jackie Brown. Mm-hmm. Like the dialogue in those movies are so good. I feel like I can just put it on in the background and work on something and listen to it while I work on whatever. This movie is definitely like that. I think the acting, the dialogue, the humor, and plus the raw cut editing, I think that like this is just everything I kind of like in a comedy.
Exactly. And you know, this is one of those movies that's like I would not mind having it like on a special edition Blu-ray or something cool like that, because it is one of those films where it's like you would definitely be watching again and again. And that's almost how I am nowadays too. It's like I don't buy nearly as many DVDs as I once did, but it's like there's certain movies like if it's a special edition and it's Blu-ray, yeah, I'll go for that if it's something I really like, because that's the one thing you can't get on digital. It's like on Netflix. Like I'm always kind of surprised maybe there is a company out there that's doing it, probably some real minor one, but like where you could actually have the special features and all the bonus stuff, you know, because I feel like that's almost the thing that's missing from the streaming services is you don't get any of that. And even, I mean, I know iTunes has some special features with certain movies, but I think for the most part, it's still not a common practice.
This movie's regarded so well. I wouldn't surprise you the least bit if they have some special 2-3 disc edition of it.
Yeah, no, I think there is. I think there is a special edition, like 25th anniversary or something. I read that somewhere along the way.
And the praise this movie gets, it's all deserving. So
yeah, even though nowadays they always say, like, well, Kevin Smith always says, like, oh, I can't even get a hockey movie made. But then he says that, and then I go, well, Goon 2 just came out, so what do you mean you can't get a hockey movie made? Obviously, Sean William Scott did. You had to have been one of your movies. Why don't you talk to him? Clearly, he knows how it works.
Well, did you hear, not to make it all about this, Sean William Scott was originally going to be the main character in Hit Somebody. But then it was taking too long to get Hit Somebody made. Plus, Kevin Smith, Goon was a shorter movie. Hit Somebody was originally going to be like this 3-hour epic. Mm-hmm. And then it was going to be like a 2-part movie. And now it's kind of still up in the air, and now it might be a comic or something. So, and it was taking too long. He says, well, I can't have Sean William Scott be in Goon and this. So, yeah.
Well, that makes sense, but you know what I mean? The whole point is just like, it's kind of like whenever I hear that where it says like, oh, I can't get it made for some reason. It's like, well, somebody's still making a hockey movie. I know the Goon doesn't go to theaters or anything like that, but I don't even know where Goon really, it just shows up at a store. That's all I know.
It went to a film film festival circuit, then wound up on download, and then the limited cinemas, and then Netflix, and yeah.
Well, yeah, I mean,
it was fantastic.
Yeah, I know that's kind of like how it went, obviously that, but you know what I mean. When I say doesn't go to cinemas, I mean that doesn't go like nationwide. Like I always say, if you show up in only like a couple cinemas or even a film fest, that's not really going to cinemas. You know what I mean?
Yeah, no, it is kind of like the limited run thing. It's not like the big. I think Kevin Smith wanted the big sexy for it. For how expensive the movie probably would have been if he's doing this big epic that goes over the course of like I think 20 or 30 years, then he's probably going to be a little bit more of an expensive movie, especially when it's a period piece. So I think that's one reason why it was probably so expensive to make. But now he might be making a comic out of it, so we'll see what happens.
Yeah, so that'd be kind of cool because hockey is that sport that just never gets enough recognition as you'd wish it did. I always just look at it for it being like a much more like something going on sport than especially football and baseball and of course soccer. So soccer's like just the shitty version of like hockey, but they don't even get to hit each other in soccer. It's like. Soccer's that sport that's so boring you can play it in a video game that it's that boring. You're like, God, you get halfway through the game, you're like, you know what, let's play something else. You want to play NBA Jam? Yeah, let's play NBA Jam.
Well, I know that one time we were still, you came across, like, there's like a Mega Man soccer game. Like, this might do it. You're like, nope, still
Nope, even Mega Man soccer's boring. It's like, God, I don't know what it is. Just soccer's just fucking boring. I mean, I'll say this. If you're out there kicking the ball with friends, I can see where it's kind of fun. But I don't know what it is. It's just like it's just like I mean I get it like why it's popular sport because all you need is a fucking ball and like somewhere to play it. So I mean yeah that makes sense. You don't every other sport you need fucking like hockey you need skates and you need ice and you need or at least rollerblades and you need pads and so on and sticks and pucks and goals. Football you need all the accessories there too. But even baseball, you need a little bit more stuff. I mean, I guess you can still get by with just a ball and a bat, but for the most part, you still need a little bit more gear, where soccer, you need absolutely nothing just about.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, I think it's one of those... Well, we just probably sound so American to any overseas listeners. Like I don't see why the rest of the world likes this fucking thing where you just kick a ball at each other's balls back and forth.
Well, I think it is. It's just like being an American, it's hard to like soccer. I'm sorry. It's just, I think it's because like no matter who you are, like... your entire life, one, you just have everybody be like, oh, you don't fucking play soccer. I mean, if you're 5 years old, whatever, and you're kicking the ball around, or 10 years old, whatever, like, that's one thing. But you man up and you go to a real sport, or you just don't play sports at all. That's just what happens. The decision that's made at, like, age 12, it's a very serious one. And only in America do you make this decision, because clearly nobody else in the world can understand. You get that right, don't you, boy?
Well, I can think it's so weird, though, because... I played soccer as a kid. Nearly everybody...
Yeah, everybody plays soccer as a kid.
Every guy friend I have played soccer at some point when they were a kid. Yet it's this thing that our generation... We're just like, I don't give a fuck. And then, like, once the Americans make it to, like, the finals, like, come on! USA! USA! Oh, they lost, but I don't care.
Well, and those are just those kind of there's those kind of sports fans. I feel that they just follow just the winning team. They could care less if you don't win. They don't care about you. But if it's winning and it's like whatever they think, they're after it. But yeah, soccer's just one of those ones. Like I just think that myself, I will never get it. I mean, like obviously, I'm not saying like you can't like soccer. It's stupid. I'm like no. If you like it, like I get that. Like you like it, but to me, it's just like I look and go, God, is that just like the most? Or I don't know. I guess. Because I just look at it like this, like, well, why don't you play hockey? That's a real sport, and it's got punching in it.
Well, that's whenever I go to a Sharks game, or whenever I watch hockey, it's just really fun. Mm-hmm. I'm never bored. Something's always happening, whether they're moving quick, and I think we said this before. I think it's a combination of just big, angry, hulking, like brutes. Like what comes to mind almost, and this is gonna almost be like a more of a nerd comparison, I guess, or comic book comparison, would be like almost kind of imagine like if I was to draw like a hockey player, I'd almost probably draw him the way Frank Miller draws Batman or draws someone from Sin City. Just this big, hulking fucking brute with a stick. But the thing is, the combination of that and doing this thing, like being so graceful on the ice, like skating backwards like it's no big deal, and like because I can't fucking do that. That's the thing. Maybe
it's just because you never put the time into it.
I never did.
Yeah, I say don't say you can't do it because you could. It's just you would take time and effort. Yeah.
Well, also it's just one of those things. I never really put a whole lot of effort into learning how to like ice skate or rollerblade. So that was always my thing that kind of kept me from playing. But whenever we played like in like the street as kids, like on foot, it was just like one of the funnest things to me. So whenever I watch the sport itself and just see these guys like just fucking just dashing like crazy and being able to do all these crazy maneuvers, and then at the same time just being just like fuck you, just like all this angry testosterone, just be like, man, I can't help but just fucking the weird contrast of that,
Yeah, it's just one of those ones I look at it as far as just like straight up sports, like it just doesn't get any better than hockey does. There's just that's what it's all about, To me, as far as a sport, I think it's like I just look. It's like it's so awesome. Like I don't know. I'm not one of those people like I don't have that kind of free time to watch it on TV. But it is one of those ones like I do like going to a game live. That is really fun.
It is, yeah. So it's one of those things I kind of wish I got into. I really wish I got into it. So, but yeah, at least I have slap shots though.
Yeah, see, slap shot. Now there's a perfect way to get your hockey experience, and it comes in a nice story-driven 2-hour ride, and it's perfect. But yeah, it's a movie. If you haven't seen this yet, or you need to just watch it again, it's been that long. This is that movie. It's like, God, it's just such a classic. Like I'd almost say it's like I've only seen this movie once right now. I would say it's like in probably like top 5 best like sports movies I've ever seen.
Definitely, it's definitely up there for me. It's somewhere definitely within my top.
It's like
5
there with like
3.
Rocky IV and like Happy Gilmore and.
Well, you got to limit it to like one Rocky movie because there's like 7. So
yeah, I'll take my Rocky IV. That's my favorite.
Yeah, because Rocky would at least take 2 of the top 5
easily
best sports movies. Barely. It just. I mean, not barely. I mean, just at minimum 2.
Yeah, I would say, really, if somebody said like, "What's your top 5 favorite sports movies?" and they just named off 5 Rockies, I'd be like, "Yeah, that makes sense."
Yeah, that makes sense.
I totally get that. Like, that's definitely. I'll say that they're definitely above everything else. But yeah, good times to be had. So check out Slapshot if you haven't seen it. Again, we'll put a little link in the description there. How you can help support the podcast too, even. And till then, check out oldmanorange.com for more comics, podcasts, videos, animations, and more. I'm Spencer Scott Holmes.
And I'm Rand Dunigan.
We'll see you some other time.
Later, folks.
Thanks again for listening to the Old Man Orange podcast. Be sure to check out oldmanorange.com for more podcasts, comics, animations, videos, and a whole lot more. You can easily support the show by buying something from one of our Amazon links on the website or in the show's description itself. Doesn't cost you a penny, but every single thing you buy from there just by using that link to take you to Amazon helps us out a bit. You can also really help the show out, though, by spreading the word the good old-fashioned way and rate and review us on all the sites that you find this podcast. Anything from iTunes to Podbean, to Newgrounds, YouTube, you name it, any little bit helps. Give a sub and share it to your friends, family, any jamoke you see out on the street, you let them know about Old Man Orange Podcast.
And be sure to check out the Old Man Orange comic book Pizza Boys on both Amazon and Comixology. Till then, we'll see you some other time.